Welcome to Business as Usual podcast, episode 10. And this one's going to be a little bit different to usual because Mike's not here. It's just me. He's on a training program all weekend, and people say teachers don't work long hours. So I'm going to keep this fairly short. I'll go through 3 stories as usual. So it'll be exactly the same. We just won't have the discussion. I've got 3 stories. You can follow us on social media. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter. My Twitter is at Mr. J Goodrich. Mike's is at Mr. M Sawyer. Instagram page is at business as usual _ where we just post little reminders. So if you don't get reminders of these every Friday, if you go on the Instagram, you'll be able to see a little post and the story and stuff to remind you to listen to these. I'm going to go straight into it with the first story. So the new story coming out of East Anglia, which is actually where I'm based, in Hawkin's Bazaar. So if you've not heard of Hawkin's Bazaar, they don't have a huge amount of stores, and the majority of them are East region. It's a toy shop, and they have announced today that it's basically collapsed. They've gone into administration. This puts at risk 200 jobs and 20 stores. And their website's already gone down. So the website's gone down. You can't place any orders. The stores have all got clearance sales on, and the administrators are in. They're saying that any gift cards, so if people received gift cards for these businesses over the Christmas period, there's only a limited amount of time that you can use those before they become invalid. And I think it's not uncommon for a high street business to fail. And in particular, it's not uncommon for a toy shop on the high street to fail. We've seen examples of this recently. We've seen Toys R Us went a few years ago, and Argos has downsized. Argos has gone from having its own stores to being like a kiosk in Sainsbury's, which is the local Argos to me, is basically just a few of those little readers where you can search, the little iPad kind of things where you can search what you want, and a couple of the catalogs and a few little displays, but ultimately it's just a check-in point really. And that's a pattern across the market. There's the market for the toy shop just doesn't exist in the same way it did when I was a kid. I know when I was young, we used to get the Argos catalogue and we used to circle it, or the Toys R Us catalogue. We'd circle what we wanted, and then Santa would obviously bring it. But Amazon's changed the game, and online selling has changed the game, where these businesses are able to, because they don't have to pay for all the shop front costs, are able to sell these at a much cheaper rate, and it's much more convenient for the consumer to order online rather than having to go into a shop. So we've seen this with Amazon coming onto the market. You can buy pretty much anything there. We've seen the rise of e-commerce and the impact that's had, and the impact that it's had on businesses like Argos and Toys R Us. So it's no real surprise that a smaller business in that market, Hawkin's Bazaar, as I mentioned, only has 20 stores. So really, really small scale compared to those businesses. Not really a huge shock that they've gone under. But maybe the administrators will be able to save them and they'll be able to stay afloat. But it doesn't look good for that business. The second story I want to talk about is interest rates. So it was published today that some figures on the economy were published today, and the general feeling is that pressure has eased on the Bank of England. So the British economy has performed a little bit more strongly than expected in January so far. And the reason that's important, I thought it was a really good opportunity to talk about the impact of interest rates and what interest rates actually mean for a business or for a consumer in particular. So this news about the economy doing a little bit better increases the chance that the Bank of England is going to hold interest rates. And what that means is they're going to keep the base interest rate at the same. And there was an expectation that they might drop the interest rates, and I'll explain why that happens. And so interest rates are the price of borrowing, basically, or the reward for saving. So if you get a loan out, you would pay back the value of the loan plus the interest rate. And higher interest rate means that you're less likely to borrow, because if the interest rates are higher and you borrow, for example, for a loan to buy a car, to pay for a holiday, or to buy a house, when interest rates are higher, the amount that you have to pay back overall is higher. And so what you would find is that borrowing decreases. And on the other side of that, if the interest rates are higher, then there's more of a reward for you to save your money, because if you put your money in the bank, then your money will grow at the value of the interest rate. So generally speaking, the Bank of England gets a little bit of control in this. And so what they will do is if spending is low in the economy, they might decrease interest rates, because that makes taking a loan out or borrowing money more attractive. And the more people who borrow money and have access to credit and finance, the more spending there is. Similarly, though, if they want to cut spending in an economy, they might increase interest rates, because it makes loans a little bit more difficult to get. And this is something that they'll use when the economy is going through strength or weakness, basically. And we've had plenty of examples of that over the last sort of 15 years. So I thought it was an interesting news story, just because it has interest rates sometimes for those students who don't have a big economic background or don't study economics, sometimes find the concept of interest rates a little bit of a struggle. But it's really, really important, because even if you don't study business, you will at some point gain finance. You will take out a loan, or you will have a savings account. You probably already do. And so it's really, really important to know what those interest rates are doing for you. And the impact is, there's a negative correlation between what they're doing for saving and what they're doing for borrowing. The third and final story that I want to talk about today, I guess I did say this probably would be quite a short podcast. I'm 5 minutes in, I'm on my third story. Maybe we need to cut Mike out, because maybe he's just slowing us down. Is that the World Economic Forum is currently going on. So it's the World Economic Forum of 2020, and there's a few different sort of parts to that. But in one part, there's a lot of interviews and discussions and panels involving a lot of really important politicians and really important sort of people in the business world. And there's been two real focuses from the coverage that I've read so far, and I've been having a look at it over the last day. One big focus is a focus that I think we've made mention to quite a lot on this podcast so far, and that is the focus on the climate and the focus on businesses thinking about the climate. And you'll all have heard of Greta Thunberg, the 17-year-old activist, and she's been really outspoken about how the impact on the environment is hugely negative, and she's been very critical of government and very critical of businesses for the way that they've not helped the environment. And it's not just Greta saying this. There's a lot of people coming out who've got quite strong views on the environment. Al Gore is a known sort of activist behind climate change, and he has actually compared the climate change to previous historic events. He referred to it. He said that the crisis was way worse than many realize and was intensifying way faster. And I guess one of the things that they're hoping, the two of them and others are going to hope is going to come from this economic forum, is that businesses and government place a bigger priority on the environment. And I'm going to talk about this this is one of my other stories to research, but Tesco, for example, this week have announced changes that they're going to make to try and help with the environment. And then that's the intention behind this World Economic Forum. It focuses on the key issues within the world, and a lot of this is going to have an impact on business. So climate change, it'll be interesting to see how businesses respond to that, is one. The other one that is also incredibly relevant to businesses, especially in the UK, is trade. And there's been a lot of talk about the EU and Brexit. As you probably are aware, we're due to leave the European Union next Friday. We might have a special episode 11 Brexit special on it. And at the moment, we're leaving without trade deals. And the reason we need these trade deals is because these trade deals determine the tariffs and quotas, that the taxes and the allowances for our trade with other countries. And it's really, really important that we get trade deals that are beneficial for us and suit the requirements of our business and our economy. And they've said, so the politicians who've been speaking this week have talked about the priorities for the UK, and they've said that the priority is to strike a trade deal with the European Union ahead of the United States. And as you can imagine, some of the United States politicians aren't very happy about that, but that's what the UK are saying at the moment. And I thought I'd just provide some detail on this and some numbers to just sort of quantify why it's really, really important that we have these trade deals. And so, first of all, if you look at the United States exports and imports are really, really important to the UK. We are an island, and we're a very advanced island. And what I mean by that is we consume a lot more than we physically can create. And so we rely quite heavily on imports of certain products. We obviously don't have the climate to produce certain things, and we don't have the manufacturing base that a lot of other places do. We're very much a tertiary industry country. We've got a lot of services, a lot of financial services, and we don't manufacture anywhere near as much as we used to. And so it's important that we are able to import buying products from other countries. And with our relationship with the United States, which is why it's important we do get a trade deal with the United States, is that we export to the United States about $45 billion worth of goods. We import 46 billion. So we import just a little bit more than we send out. So it's really important that for those businesses who deal with the United States, who buy from the United States or sell to the United States, it's really important that they have a trade deal that's beneficial. But the reason, and perhaps this is the reason why it's more important, or the priority to deal with the EU first, is we trade much, much more with the EU. There's a really good website for this. If you go on oec.world, you can find the different profiles for different countries, and on it you can see all of the different who our biggest sort of trade partners are. Who do we sell the most to? Who do we receive the most from? And I put some of the data together. So obviously we've said 45 and 46 billion for the US. Germany is our biggest, and we actually import 90 billion from Germany, so twice as much. That's actually about 15% of our total imports come from Germany. On top of that, we import 47 billion from the Netherlands, which is again more than we import from the United States, and 36 billion from France. So we import a lot from the European Union nations. We also export a lot to these places. As I mentioned, we export 45 billion to the United States. We export 36 billion to Germany, 24 billion to both Netherlands and France. So it's really important that the UK gets these trade deals so that businesses that, for example, for tariffs will be quite high at the start, I imagine, if depending on the arrangements we have. I think there'll be World Trade Organization arrangements until we can reach a trade deal. It's going to be more expensive potentially for businesses in the UK to buy from the UK, from the European Union, and to buy from America and to sell. And there might be limitations on what we can as well. So it's really important that those trade deals get arranged soon. So it's something that's worth keeping an eye on. And obviously, we'll see what happens in the next few weeks and months with regards to once we actually leave the European Union, how quick it will be before these trade deals are put together. So something else that you might want to have a little bit of a look at further, I would go on Google and search World Economic Forum 2020 and just read the headlines at least, and so have an idea of what the big issues are in the world. I've got 3 other stories for you to have a little bit of a research of yourself. As I mentioned earlier, there's a Tesco story about the environment. They've said that they're going to stop sales of plastic wrapped multipacks. The second story is that Tesla has had a bit of controversy over the last few years, but their share price has skyrocketed over the last few months. It's doubled, in fact, in the last 6 months. So might want to have a little bit of a look at why that might be the case. And then the final story worth researching is British Steel is close to a rescue deal. So they've been in trouble for a little while now. They're close to a rescue deal by a Chinese firm. So it might be worth having a look into that as well and seeing what more information you can find. Hopefully, after 12, 30 minutes, you weren't completely sick of my voice. It's just like listening to Ant and Dec, really, isn't it? But have a look at those stories. Mike should be back will be back next week, so you'll get a bit of a break from my dull northern accent. Have a look at those things. As I mentioned, you can subscribe on Spotify. You can subscribe on YouTube. Though we passed 1,000, which is quite a nice little milestone to get to. And follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And we will see you next week. I will see you next week. Thank you very much.